What is the basis? What is the beginning of all, so-called beginning of all this? Ignorance, unknowing. We don't know our own. And because of that, what happens? I. And because of I, what happens? Desires. And what else? And what else? Perfect. This is not a test, by the way. So the critical thing is to understand, to experience. This is the thing. If we don't experience these things, they will only always be intellectual. And that's good, intellectual, but better is to live it. So first we have to experience that we don't know. That's easy. But we have to get the experience, not just think, I don't know. In other words, we have to experience ourselves as selves as separate beings and blah, 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 blah. Really experience that. And the next thing that we have to experience is that we live here. I is right here. And lots of times there's the meditation practice of where is this I? It's a wonderful meditation practice. Is it in my head? Where is this I? And if I would chop off one of my hands, well, it's kind of violent, but if I removed one of my hands, would I disappear and go through the whole body? If I remove this, if I remove that, where is the I? Is the I in this? Is the I in that? And ultimately, if we do this carefully and patiently, we'll see, well, is there an I at all? Or is I, as they would say in the Buddhist tradition, conventionally designated? In other words, it's a concept designated on what appears to be I, a label, a notion. And then the next thing is to notice when our minds are moving towards something or away from something. That, just with this silly little thing like donuts. Yes! Just this little, because if we notice on these really seemingly simple, dumb little things, we're practicing for noticing the more complex ones. Because where our real suffering is not the donuts, really, or the notion of eating tarantulas. Our real suffering comes with the stories that we're telling about the events of our lives. And which we call sometimes judgments. But by the way we get a handle on that is by noticing the dumb little things. Mind moving towards Fruit Loops. And if you don't know what Fruit Loops are, mind won't move towards it. And if you do know, you'll probably move away. So what happens is with what we've already said, imagine, everyone here has seen a snail or a slug move around the ground, right? And they're kind of cute in a weird sort of way. They have these little tentacles and they kind of move them around, searching for where they're going, and God knows how they determine what they determine, but we assume they're moving towards food and away from. All right, so yeah, we can see that. They're really simple creatures. We have more sophisticated, more tentacles than just the snails. We have eyes, we have ears, we have nose, we have the indriyas, the sense organs. And we have to remember the sense organs, eyes, ears, nose, etc. Mind is one of those. So, like the little snails, we are moving into the next moment, looking through our eyes, through our ears, through our nose, through our skin, through our sense of taste, and through our mind. Projecting this me along with it. The Western idea, of course, is that the senses are somehow passive and take in whatever we see. But the Eastern idea is, no, this sense of self, this whole little psychological organism, throws it out. Searching for the next moment, which in some Buddhist traditions is called a diluted attitude towards a transitory network. And what that means is that what we basically are transitory networks of sensations that in a diluted way we think is me, which we then send through our senses. Then according to the yoga psychology, there is, confusingly enough, a process labeled manas, which means mind. So now we have this problem because there's more than one designation for this word manas. And so we can get really confused if we try to nail this down. But just remember that this kind of manas, this mind, is the process that says, what is it, what is it, what is it? Which we're unaware of usually. It's doing it for us. That we move through the world and constantly our brain is processing whatever our sense organs and sorting it for us. The question, the pattern that begins the process, the what is it pattern, is labeled manas. We can find it out. Okay, we can do another experimental mind exploration when we use the famous example of, guess what? The rope and the snake, which is appropriate. And in this, it's only one of my sadhanas is to notice when I'm doing this. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a rope and a snake. It can be a leaf on the ground. And so let's just use rope and a snake. We're walking down the road, and we're at Ridgely, not in the middle of Providence. And it's darker. It's kind of not hugely dark, but dark enough that a shape on the side of the road, which probably is a leaf, but well, let's just say, is long, looks like a snake. All right, so we imagine seeing that shape. It's going to be hard if we don't really see it, but anyway. Imagine there's a shape there, and think about the past when this has happened to you, because it has, I can guarantee it. And you're not quite sure what it is, right? It might, and what happens? You're saying to yourself, what is it, what is it, what is it? Right? Can you remember a time when you were not quite sure? I saw a leaf and I was thinking, what is that? All right. Do you happen to recall that your mind felt unsettled because you didn't know what it was? We have this need to know what it is. This manas is sorting, saying, what is it, what is it? And until we make a designation, it will go on. And sometimes we can't because we really don't know what it is. So we mind, the indriyas, the senses, the eyes, pull in this shape. Actually, they pull in a lot more than that. They pull in the fact that there's something separate, that there is something that is flat that we would call ground, that is underneath, that is solid, and But here we're concerned about the shape, the long shape that mind has pulled in. And we feel like, what is it, what is it? And if we grew up in India, there's really a sense of, or in California, there's really a sense of, uh-oh. It could be, if it's a snake, danger. So that's beginning to arise along with the what is it. Why? Because we have another faculty according to the system called buddhi. That buddhi makes the determination, sometimes called intellect. It decides, it makes the determination. It pulls from previous experience and says that, my friend, is a snake. Now, buddhi isn't necessarily right, is it? But based on past experience, long things that look in a certain way could be a snake, and it looks like a snake, and buddhi says, yes, it's a snake. If we never had even seen a snake ever, we couldn't make that determination. That we may have seen something else long, but we couldn't say it's a snake. Or we might not know, and we just what is it? Babies will do that. They love to do that. If you will recall toddlers who are learning language, what do they love to do? They love words, and they love to point at things and say, bear! So what are they doing? They're learning. This is buddhi connecting again. That's a bear, dog, kitty. And we do that constantly. I mean, that's a simplified version. We have adult versions of that going on constantly. And so we make the determination, and then along with that determination, the Yoga Sutras will say, is always accompanying a feeling that goes along with it. And that feeling is going to be either towards, against, or neutral. So Buddhi says snake, immediately the perception arises at the same time of whatever our perception of snake is, or whatever it's going to be. Or if it's a tarantula in Cambodia, it's like food. In California, we'd be running. So whatever it is, whatever our experience has been in the past, it will rise simultaneously with the perception. So when I say tarantula, you feel in your mind a pulling away. When I say rasagola, you feel, if you know what they are, you feel in your mind a moving towards. Unless you've eaten so many of them that you swear you will never eat another one, in which case you'll have kind of mixed. So every experience that this me has is going to be joined with this kind of feeling of what we could call pleasure or pain. And part of the Maya, part of the illusion here is thinking that this is the thing. That this is this feeling of happiness is what I want. This is what I'm going for. And this feeling of pain is what I got to avoid, and this is the whole thing. And so God knows if a snail can decide what's going to make it happy or not, but we can. And it's very complex. That I keep using really simple examples, but when we're talking about really complex human relationships, and complex interactions have so many layers of both raga and dvesha in them and we are so inclined to accept things that are true that are not true, that this whole reaction, stimulus and reaction, is infinitely more complex than just saying yes or no. But the thing to do is to start, and through meditation is probably the best way, to start to train the mind to notice that our mind is doing this when we're pulling away from situations, when we're moving towards them, because we're going to have them. Yep, gonna have it. Whatever that is. Now, although we could go into this a little bit, and maybe we will later if you want to, then we're a little bit off the rail here, because now in our example, we see snake. And that's our conventional reality. While we see it, and while we believe it's a snake, conventionally it is a snake. But in actuality, it's superimposed on something else. In actuality, it's rope. But we see snake, and while we see snake, we live in a snake world. And that's the world we're living in. So just saying, oh, well, it's all an illusion, is not going to work. Because we can tell ourselves that, and that's good. We need to pour something like that. It's all divine, it's all an illusion, whichever way we prefer. But we need to train our minds not to see the snake. Little by little by little. And so this is a good sadhana, by the way. This seemingly silly thing of noticing when we're mistaking one thing for another. and what our mind does. There's a leaf. I do this all the time at Ridgely, especially now when leaves are all falling. And in the dark, you don't know, is it a squirrel? Oh yeah, I'm sure that's a squirrel. Well, it's not, it's a leaf. But while I'm looking at it, squirrel, it's a squirrel. So I notice how my mind is caught by squirrelness when it really isn't. And that's exactly what is happening. So little things, these little daily, seemingly inconsequential things, sometimes are the key to the so-called big thing. They're the key to unlocking this little twist of Maya that we're just kind of taking for granted. That yes, meditation is necessary, but how to carry that meditation into daily life is to remember, oh yeah, snake and rope. How do I see the snakes and the ropes in daily life? And just in the physical way, seeing leaves looking like squirrels. And then you start to see, oh, there's another layer here. If we catch it, if we catch ourselves in the act of thinking that a leaf is a squirrel, we understand how the mechanism works in our mind. And once we've understood that, we start seeing it all over the place with our mind. And you catch the very surface, and then what do? You dive deep. Don't stay at the surface, because all of this is, for us, very hidden in plain sight. That don't be content to just, if I could give anybody any advice, it would always be dive deep. That don't be content just to take the surface and take it and try and dive deeper and deeper with it, and nothing that you think or say is going to be stupid. It's just going to be diving deep. That, in other words, don't run any value judgment on it. So say, take some dumb little thing, leaves looking like squirrels. That's the beginning, because once you catch it one place, you will start to catch it everywhere. That people often say, well, I've been practicing for so many years and nothing has happened. And actually, it has. But it's become so much a part of our consciousness that we don't even see it. In other words, when I remember this distinct memory when I went to school, and I was in the 2nd grade, so I was 7 or 8 years old. The school was such and such a way that when we came to school, at first we left our books by the front door of our classroom, and then we went out to play in the playground. And the 2nd graders had to go out to play in the playground past where the 6th graders' schoolroom was, and those, they're 12. And I remember seeing a 6th grade math book outside the door and thinking, how will I ever be able to do that? And really, I felt anxiety. And I remember this perfectly. And but the truth of the matter is, we go through 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and by the time we're in the 6th grade, we're ready for it. And we don't even really notice along the way, oh yeah. We just have moved forward. So we can't really measure. I mean, we're trying not to measure. That we just go forward. And you can use anything in your life as bait or as the experimental subject. That with understanding that there's this kind of tree of life, this beginning with avidya and going through all the different ragadvesha moving towards, and that we throw our sense of self into the next moment, and we take the next perceptions, and our mind sorts them, and our buddhi makes the distinction. That is that. So, is our buddhi always right? No. One thing our buddhi is making a mistake is that it's outward turned and not seeing the inward. As the Katha Upanishad said, mind was made to turn outward. So, us spiritual aspirants should not kick ourselves in the head and say, oh, I'm not good at this. I'll never get this. Well, this is telling a nice story. Thou art that. That it's what Swami Vivekananda said. We have put our own hands over our own eyes and are crying out that it's dark. That just move your hands. So these are the practices for moving our hands. And each one of us will find it differently in our lives according to the kinds of things that come and go in our mind. So where I was at, we see something and it's accompanied by a feeling. Now, the perception in itself is neither good nor bad, yeah? It's just seeing, just hearing, actually what is hearing? It's sound waves coming in through our hearing apparatus and being filtered by our brain into language, let's say. And then we understand the words, or we don't, if it's a language we don't understand, but it's nothing more than sound waves. Now, the sound waves will be different if I say, oh, you are so wonderful. What is that? That's sound waves. Other than, you idiot! We will have a different reaction to that. It's just sound waves. So where did all this experience suddenly arise out of? Because our buddhi matched the sound waves with a previous experience, and immediately, along with it, a feeling arises. So someone says, oh, you did so wonderful and it's so great. A feeling of happiness arises. And someone says, you idiot, you are fired. The opposite feeling will arise. That almost inevitably, the yogis say the key to all of this is to split the perception from the feeling. Easier said than done. In other words, the perception is simply perception at the beginning. It is neither good nor bad, but it's an experience happens, we perceive it, we react. We have a feeling that comes up simultaneously, and then we react. And that is the key to, the whole idea of karma. That it's just a constant chain of action-reaction. And we react according to our previous experience. Now, we can see that at work in our life now, that we are the sum total of who our life experiences. But of course, we're talking about the Eastern system. We're not just the sum total of our life now, we are the sum total of all our lives. That some will say come from beginningless existence. So we bring into our life not just these life's experiences, but experiences from the past, yes, even our snail births. And that's the vast, what is called in the Yoga Sutras, karma ashaya, which means reservoir of karma. Please, please, do not think that karma is a thing, or that a reservoir actually exists as a thing. That there's something static called karma that you could find somewhere. Well, that's my karma and that's yours. Or that there is actually some little thing that we could cut open and say, well, he left his karmic reservoir behind this time. That it's an idea, it's a notion, it's an explanation for how things are. That we can't explain it exactly. You cannot find it anywhere. Just in the same way as Brahman is not a thing. God is not a thing. In other words, it's not other. It's not something that could be ever. What thing is there in the one? Could there be a thing, this notion thing? Could there be one in the one? No. In the same way, these things, like these explanations like karma ashaya, you won't find them, but they nevertheless seem to operate. So the idea is, we see a snake, and according to we grew up in India, so we know that snakes are poisonous for the most part, or Australia, that I think has more poisonous snakes than India. And so we see snake, our buddhi all the physical organization goes, the same thing, Western science, each part of our eye will pick up each side and it will mix and turn it right side up, and we have a perception, we see snake, and our buddhi says snake, and then immediately comes up danger and possibly all the memories that we had that we can remember of good or bad. If we happen to study snakes, we won't probably react in fear. But if we've been bitten by a snake, or anyone we know has been bitten by a snake, when we see that snake, all those scenarios will come up too. Maybe not consciously, but it will go into our recognition of the snake. Okay, so we do that with everything. And based on the fact now that we think that we want to have happiness and avoid suffering, we're now acting with that goal in mind. And so we are going to move towards the things that our past experience combined with our perception tell us are pleasurable, and away from the things that we think are unpleasurable. So again, Katha Upanishad is a wonderful Upanishad that describes this whole process. They'll say things that are Shreya or Preya, from Shri and Pri. The Pri meaning the delightful, the dear things, the things that we want. Okay, I want that donut, and I'm going to forget right now that it has many bad qualities. That this is the first of the perceptions and memories that catch us. Let's just say attachment, what we call attachment. We can analyze it to the nth degree, because sometimes if we just say attachment, aversion, we have to clearly know attachment and aversion. Who cares? We have to know exactly how that operates in our life. So, immediately, if we say we have to get rid of longing desire, somebody will raise their hand and say, what about the desire to realize God? Or what about the desire to help all beings, the bodhisattva vow? What about the desire to be of service? The klesha, the afflictions, the disturbing emotions are just that. They disturb us. That I think the Yoga Sutras will say to the effect of that which causes peace of mind to be lost. To the effect of. That how do we know when a so-called desire is catching us in a negative way, let's say? Ultimately, all desires are desires, but now we're going from the base. That how do we know? Besides the fact that someone's going to tell us yes, no. How do we know inside ourselves when a desire is a klesha? I mean, real negative and disturbing emotion. Any guesses? Yeah, but how do we feel? Not good. Anxious. That a klesha, a disturbing emotion, is just that. It disturbs us. We don't feel right. See, we will feel right about trying to go for God realization. With the caveat that we're still moving towards something. But in this in the case of spiritual life, we're substituting a beneficial moving towards for things that might not be beneficial. But as Sri Ramakrishna says, ultimately, they all have to go. But we're not talking about this ultimate level now. We're talking about right here, right now. So we have a desire. Let's say we desire to put on our shoes. Is that a good one or a bad one? It's neutral. It's not, unless we've got some weird thing about shoes. It's just a neutral desire. I want to put on my shoes because I want to go to the store. Is that neutral, good, or bad? Could be anything. It's just new. It's not. What about my friends all drive Porsches and I want one too? Yes, there's a lot of things. That's a disturbing emotion. What about I would really like, well, this is a good one. What about I would like peace in this world?
It depends how I pursue that.
Yeah, that could be positive, it could be negative. We could be using this as a cover for aversion or fear or anger. We could be using, I'm not saying we are, but we could. We could be using, I would like peace in the world for I would just like peace for myself. And then I'll be happy if there's peace in the world. That's a little bit of a goofy thing. And actually, on the other side, the flip side, you get someone like Hitler. I'll be happy if the Aryans can rule the world because that's what's meant to be. And in order for me to be happy and all these other people that support me, I have to kill off all these people. That's what will make me happy. They probably didn't say it that way, and there's all rhetoric that went with it, but essentially that's what it was. We'll be happy when all these people are dead because they're the problem. Okay, are you beginning to identify possibly a pattern of mind? I'll be happy if my boss would get off my back. I'll be happy if my kid would just clean up his room. I'll be happy if there's peace on earth, but before that, while there's even a person suffering, I'm going to suffer too, profoundly. I'll be happy if people like me because I think there should be peace in the world. This is how complicated it can get. And this is why we practice on little things, because then we start seeing how our mind creates these. This is creating a reality here. We've already created the illusion, sort of. It's been created for us at a level of me. And now I have all these things that are going to make me happy. I'll be happy if I get this job, and I'll be happy if this happened because I was unhappy, because I was frustrated, because this is how we build it. So, in the case of longing desire, this is the klesha kind of more attached desire that's going to lead us to unhappiness and away from yet oneness for sure. When they arise, they cause us to lose our peace of mind. And that doesn't necessarily mean we go into hysterics. We fall apart. What it means is we might just feel slightly unsettled. Something about it, our mind is saying, is this right? Is this right? We don't feel right. Whereas, say, something that is much more beneficial, we'll feel right about it for the most part. That we won't feel that unsettledness. So, longing desire wants to acquire something based on its attractiveness. And something could be a friend, or a husband, or a job, or whatever, So what are we doing? When we want something, it's based on it being attractive. Something about it we find, we say yes. And we want it. But the thing about it is, it's always based on exaggerating how attractive it is. That donut, suddenly everything about the donut is now attractive. And then what happens? What else happens along with it? What has to happen for me to exaggerate the donut in my mind? Well, I have to be forgetting something besides the fact that I'm the one, which is at the base of everything. I have to be forgetting that the donut also has negative qualities. I have to be forgetting that the donut is going to make me fat, or give me a heart attack, or whatever it is. If I eat too many of them, I'm going to be sick. I forget all that, right? All right, so that's a simple example. What about if my boss yells at me? No, let me stay with attraction. What about if I'm walking down the street and I see a friend, no, I see my girlfriend if I'm a guy. And this is a new girlfriend, so I haven't figured out that girlfriends have both positive and negative qualities yet. Or boyfriends for that matter. That now girlfriend looks nothing but good. And if you don't remember this, remember when we were teenagers, right? That, oh my God, what happens? So cute, everything, especially girls. They think when they're, boy, oh, so cute. And what do? At least we did when I was a kid. You get on the phone and you talk for hours about nothing. And why? Because we've forgotten we're only exaggerating the good qualities. He's so wonderful, he's so this, he's so that, and everything he does is wonderful. And we've forgotten that every human being has good times and bad times. So we've exaggerated, we're attracted to the object. We've exaggerated its good qualities and we've forgotten if it has any downside. Not to mention we've forgotten our basic nature, which is the basis of it all. And so then what happens? Okay, so we have this boyfriend, and someday along the line he says something stupid, and we're shocked. Why? Because we've been covering up all this time the negative qualities, and now he gets mad or something, and now we're shocked. What actually has happened is that a little of longing desire is let go of us slightly. And so we're no longer able to ignore the downside. And so we have this. Let's go back to donuts, though. So we have donuts. And so we have all these donuts. No, let's say we're at retreat. And there's only one donut left. And a whole group of people. I want that donut. Do we stand back and give it to somebody else? Do we rush up there to take it first? What do we do? Do we even have thoughts about that donut at all, seeing that there's only one? So attachment is we want something, and when we have it, we don't want to let go. Okay, so I got the donuts, and for some reason I don't want to let go. It's not a very good example. I got the boyfriend, and I don't want to let go. I have the child, and I don't want to let go. I have the good job, and I don't want to let go. And in the case of donuts, which is a good example, if I have it and I want more of it, what is it? What's the word? Not clinging, there's another word. I want more and more and more. Greed. So attachment is moving towards an object, got to have it, based on exaggerating its good qualities and forgetting its negative qualities. And if I have it, I don't want to let go, that's also attachment. And if I want more, that's the attachment called greed. Gotta have it, more and more love. And nothing anybody does can satisfy me that I am loved. Because I basically am believing the story that I'm not lovable. So no matter what I do, everything is designed to get more and more and more. But I'm never satisfied because the basic maya of it is I don't believe that I'm capable of being loved. So nothing anyone does or says will satisfy me. So you see how complicated it can be. All right, then there's aversion. It was the opposite. What do you think happens in aversion? Yeah, we don't want it. So we can see this all over the place. I don't want that. So we regard whatever the object, first we regard an object, and that's the avidya. And there's an I there regarding the object, and whatever the object we see is, we think it's awful. I don't want that. And we want to get rid of it or avoid it. So this one is based in exaggerating what? The negative. That everything is both positive and negative. In aversion, we exaggerate the negative qualities and we forget the positive ones. So we move away, or we have an intention to harm it, to strike out at it. That arises, and anyone here, I'm sure, that's been practicing spiritual life for any amount of time will find themselves suddenly surprised when suddenly this desire to strike out arises from out of nowhere when we thought we had practiced and gotten rid of it. It just depends on the causes and conditions that arise. So that's why Holy Mother said, you can rest when you're dead. But it's almost ingrained in us. There's nobody, short of those who are enlightened, that has overcome any of these kleshas, what they call in the Yoga Sutras, burnt away, except those who have risen entirely beyond the whole, have seen the unreality of all this, the enlightened ones. But until that ultimate enlightenment, these seeds will always reside, and we can work on them and cause them to become less, which we'll talk about, or we can choose other options, but they will always arise. They'll always be there. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist teacher, will say, you have a choice. Which seeds are you going to water? You have them all. Which seeds will you water? So by knowing how they work, we can see how they're operating in our lives. Again, aversion can masquerade. In spiritual communities, people forget sometimes that detachment is not aversion. That it's so often, I hate the world and I hate this and I'm going to get out of here. And okay, so the intention underneath it is a good one, but the problem is that's aversion, that's manifesting aversion, and the goal here is to rise above all these kleshas. So detachment does not mean we're caught either by desire or aversion. True detachment means something different, more like equanimity in the face of whatever arises. So then, what also is aversion? Hostility. What else? Impatience. What else? Animosity. What else? Think about the emotions that pull away. There's a big one here, and it starts with F. Fear. What else? Grudges. Frustration. And we all, anyone that sits in front of a computer or has to mess with their phone is going to experience that. And when we do, say my phone right now is telling me that I have to have a password that when I put it in, it says it's not right, and it is. What do I feel? I don't want that. I want it to work. So it's frustration. Frustration means something is happening and I'm not happy with it. I don't want it to do this. Now think of our habits of trying to control things. We have to do it just right and it'll be just perfect and then it will be good. And until then, us workaholics will never stop. And so then let me ask you this. What about doing things perfectly? Is it a klesha? Is it a disturbing emotion or not? Disturbing. And why? Because you're agitated. It's not a state, it's not a calm state, perfectionism. It will never, ever, ever be good enough. What else about perfectionism is a little bit dicey? Control. What is at the basis when we are trying to be perfect? Who is this me? What is this situation that's trying to be perfect? And so if we're thinking about our spiritual goal as a state of a perfect me, we've got a little problem. That we're not trying to be perfect here. Even though we can describe the state of realization or God or whatever as perfection itself. But if we're trying to make me perfect, oops, mistake. It's not about being a perfect me. It's about losing the reality of the separate me. And if I'm trying to make this separate me perfect, I will never be it will never, ever be right. And what will happen is I will feel like I'm a spiritual failure in every minute. Because I will always have that measuring tape out, measuring against Swami Yogatmanandaji. Look at him and look at me. Oh my God, I'll never be able to be like that.
Good for you.
But why are we doing this? What is this perfect me? That as Swami Vivekananda, actually at Ridgely, Swami Vivekananda, this is one reminiscence that they have there. They were in one of the rooms, the manor house, the ladies, and Swami Vivekananda came rushing in and said he'd finally figured out what his message to the West was going to be. And that is, don't imitate others, basically. This isn't verbatim, but the idea is, don't imitate others. Rather, seek yourself through your own means to the end. Don't imitate Muhammad, is it? Yeah, Muhammad's or Buddhas. Become Muhammads and Buddhas yourself, not by imitating them. So if I say, oh, Charles is so good and I just can't do it, comparing, oops, mistake. Who is this I? We just have to move into the next moment with a with a clear goal. All right, so suppose Charles actually has risen to a great state of mind and starts thinking, hey, I've achieved something. I'm pretty good. What is that? Pride. And then out of that pride, maybe, I know he wouldn't do this, but he starts lording it over everybody else. Well, Teresa, if you would just meditate 12 hours a day or whatever, I know and you don't. I am what? The foremost authority here, which is what pride says. What is that? When I start lording it over everybody else? Arrogance. And there's another one. I pretend to be something that I'm not. And this is something we all do to a certain extent. We all have these masks depending on which situation we're in. And sometimes we're pretending to be, if you live in Hollywood, you learn this because people do this for a lifestyle there. You have to pretend to be happy and rich or you don't get a job. And so everyone's going around in Hollywood, all these wonderful actors and actresses that everybody reveres, pretending that they are something other than what they are. And ultimately they crash and they get onto drugs and it's not really great. So it's a puffed up mind. Me. So I'm making it kind of silly, but we have to ask ourselves, when are we playing foremost authority here? When we get in an argument over the best way to hook up a light switch? You're not doing it right! And the mantra is, you're doing it wrong! Of course, that person might be doing it wrong. But, we all know the type that some people are going to be around telling you you're not doing it right, you're doing it wrong, you haven't done this, and maybe they know, and that's okay, but maybe they don't. They're playing foremost authority. So that is a function of arrogance. And that's a disturbed emotion. Sometimes we really do know. We won't feel disturbed then. Do you see the difference? When I'm playing foremost authority, I have to be the one that knows. Me. And if Bill tells me something different, I'm not going to listen, even though he may know and I don't. But I'm going to pretend like I know because I have to be the one. Whereas maybe I really do know, I won't care really if I'm the one or not. So that's the difference. This is another klesha. This is how it plays out in our life. There's a me there that's puffed up. We boast. And what else do we do? If there's a puffed up me, and this is the crux of it, there is something very destructive that we do with other people besides lord it over them. When we get together, this me, what do? Two things. In fact, it's on your bulletin. That you have to look at the lecture bulletin's calendar. There's either you gave a lecture or you're giving a lecture about one of these things that we do. If you're a me and I'm so special, it means that others are not so special. So what do? Yeah, and then we say, well, look at what Charlie has on. Doesn't it? He just never knows how to dress, and that's because he thinks that he's blah, 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 blah. We do it. We criticize. And we compare. And we gossip. Did you see? Did you see what Charlie had on? Do you know why? That we do this stuff all the time. That we're starting to tell ourselves stories without bothering to really see the truth. So he looked at me funny because he's mad at me because of such and such a thing that happened 2 days ago, and I know he did that, and so a whole story starts to build, right? Or we get in a fight with our friend, or our husband or whatever. What happens? We start the endless tape loop in our mind. We replay it over and over and over and over, and even when we want it out of our head, it stays there. Well, and we think, I should have said this, and he should have said that, and we're caught. And we're telling stories about it. We've never ascertained the truth, right? Let's say we're teaching and our student kind of falls asleep in our class. And all of a sudden we've built a story about him. He's falling asleep because he's being deliberately, what would you say, rude. He's being deliberately rude because all that really has happened is a student has closed her eyes and gone to sleep. And everything else is according to our various kleshas and the stories and our buddhi improperly choosing. We build the whole story. And then we become infuriated. That student is asleep. And I'm angry. Why? Because that student is asleep. How could they do that? It's so rude. Okay, what am I really angry at? Am I angry at that student? What is causing me the suffering here? The student? The student is just asleep.
The story.
The story I'm telling myself about it is what's causing me to be angry. Not the student at all. That student is just tired. Maybe that student spent all night long because his mother was in the emergency ward and had come to class nevertheless because he loved the class so much he didn't want to miss it, but lo and behold, he had to stay, he fell asleep because he had been awake all night. And here I go telling this whole story about it, and guess what? I never stopped to ask myself, is that true? And I never stopped to notice that actually what's causing the suffering is not the external experience. In other words, not the perceptions of my indriyas, But the feelings, the samskaras, we haven't used these words yet, the vasanas, the habit patterns of thinking that arise along with it, that's what causes the suffering. And I'm hooked by those. And the other thing I'm not ever thinking about is when those arise, the student falls asleep, and I think, how could he? I never stop to think, do I believe this thought? I just think it, and I think it's me. And every darn little notion that pops into my head and little perception and little thought like that, why is she falling asleep? And it's raining outside and the lights are and I'm hungry and my back hurts and blah, 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 blah. We all think that's me. Oh, that's me. I thought it. That's me. That's what makes me me. All this endless stuff that goes through my head. That's me. That's my experience. And that's my life. Is it? This is the key. And if we're meditating, this is one of the huge side benefits or one of the main benefits of meditation. What happens when we sit down to meditate? Often our mind is everywhere but on the chosen ideal or whatever our object of meditation is. It is everywhere because that's what mind does. As Katha Upanishad says, mind is made to move outward. It's in Timbuktu, and then it's in San Francisco, and then it's right here, and it's anywhere but where I want it to be. And so meditation is, we may feel frustrated because we think our mind should be right here, but it's not. And now we're starting to tell the story. Instead of just bringing the mind back, we're now mad at ourselves because our mind is in China. And so we've got two little streams of being distracted going on. And then we have another stream that says, oh, I can't meditate, I'll never be able to do this. And now we've got three little streams. What we want to do is just drop it. But the benefit is we see how it works. We see that our mind is running away. And we also begin to see what kinds of things our mind is running away to. And we start to notice the patterns that our mind habitually uses. Well, I say our mind uses, the patterns are our so-called mind. And that's the other key. We have, what, 115? Okay. The key here is, like a computer, you know, I don't know that much about computers, but I do know that the paths we take, say online, say on the internet, the paths we take the most, the places that we visit the most, the sites we visit the most, our machines can access faster. And not just because sometimes they save the site on your computer, but simply because out of use, it's easier for them to access than if you have a brand new site then they have to work through many channels and figure it out. So that's how our mind works. That our mind, we might think of as our enemy, but in reality, our mind is doing nothing but serving up exactly what it thinks we want. Because of this connection between perception and feeling. That if we have reacted in certain ways before, our mind, like the good little whatever it is, will say, oh, well, let's dish it up again. Right? It's easy. If we tend to react to things in fear, mind, like a good little person, is going to give us fear. A fear pattern. So we can go through our life and then we act again and we make that pattern stronger. So we have an experience and it leaves a mark on us. We see a snake and it bites us. And it's not a poisonous one this time, but the mark of the snake bite is on us. And it stays with us. And both the experience, the memory of being bitten by a snake and the suffering that it caused, the fear and the pain and whatever, they're stuck together. And so the next time we see a snake, that will rise again. And mind will say, snake, fear. I mean, after all, that's what we did last time. Let's do it again. So you can see where this is going. That mark in the Yoga Sutras is called samskara. But now, here's the kicker. These words, samskara and vasana, which I'm going to use, are used in very, not always the same way throughout the Indian tradition. And so you can get in some wrangles with people about what this word samskara means and what is a vasana, because it's not really clear. But let's just use it here to mean that this morphing together of a perception and the feeling leaves a mark in what they would say karma ashaya. In other words, it stays somehow with our mental continuum. And we can see this just in this life, that if we've been bitten by a snake or a dog, we are going to have some fear associated with snakes or dogs. And so then when we see another one, the same thing will come up. Now, if we get in a habit, if we do this too many times, now we've got like a habit of thinking in a certain way. So last year I was at the Bronx Zoo, and there was a little boy running around happily on the path, and his mother kept saying to him, "Be careful, be careful, it's dangerous, it's dangerous." And I thought, well, that's what happens. We can actually get a habit of thinking that looks at everything we experience as being possibly dangerous. And underneath everything then that our indriyas pick up, the feeling will be, this is a very dangerous world and we need to fear. We're not, and the basic thought here, the habit pattern, it's like a pair of glasses that we see everything with. I'm not safe. And so another person who may not have those samskaras or that habit pattern, which is vasana, that dwells with us, that permeates our thinking, that person may not see things as potentially dangerous. And in fact, not like very much that we're always worried about what might happen next. And say to us, "Why are you so anxious?" So one way of understanding the way our mind is building the story is to notice what patterns do we have. Which rose-colored glasses are we wearing? Are we wearing fear? Are we wearing anger? In other words, he was an angry person. Why? Because he tended to react to everything with anger. And everything is an outrage! Sometimes it's beneficial, maybe a little bit, to motivate us to do something, but really it's a klesha, it's a disturbing emotion. I am going through this world of perceptions. All it is perceptions. Constructing things to hate. And if you think that's crazy, I know a couple people who go through their life looking for things to not like. And if you know people like this, they're always complaining, they're never happy, nothing is good enough. So, on the other hand, there's people who are almost naively blissful. And I don't mean with equanimity. People who are almost hell-bent on seeing the good and being very naive about the not good. So these people can be found in spiritual communities a lot. Sometimes as a defense for from underneath feeling the opposite. That what Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk, used to say, they have put a spiritual ego on top of the one that they already have. So I'm using this as an example, but what does that mean? It means that they go through life because they've heard that yogis have equanimity, samadarshana, they have peace, they're always kind and and blissful, and life is just wonderful, and when actually their own life is a mess. But what they're trying to do is transcend that life and substitute another life on top. This is really common. And what happens then is I've seen it over and over and over again. So you go to a spiritual center, and it doesn't matter where, and there's always someone who seems so holy and so wonderful and so peaceful, and the next thing you know, they have a schizophrenic break. Why? Because they haven't, or something like that, they fall apart. Why? Because they've shoved down the actual ego that they need to be working at, the level they need to be working at, and substituted the spiritual me on top. And that will work for a while, but it can't go on. And that's why truthfulness is such an important thing. That, yes, we're all in the same, we're made this way with all these goofy kinds of quirks of mind, and what we need to do is quit looking at the next person and just figure out, how do these patterns operate in me? And the other thing we need to do is not apply any of these things to ourselves. Oh, I'm a horrible person. Oh, and I'm so good. But really, no, here, at least in this country, where there's a huge problem with people's self-esteem, that people are more likely to feel like they're failures and unloved. And because of that, they want to transcend, because they're suffering. And if I could only transcend this awful self that I don't like, if I could realize God, I won't be this awful self anymore. Well, there's a little bit of a problem with that, isn't there? That, who is this awful self? That's a story. So we have to be careful that in our spiritual practice, we don't condemn ourselves, let alone anybody else, but that we are not applying aversion to ourself in any way. And that we are not riding in judgment. Obviously, we don't want to ride in judgment on anybody else, but that we are not riding in judgment on ourselves. And we'll do that. Oh, I can't do this. We don't even try. We're sure we can't do it. We're afraid to get out of our comfort zone. If we tell ourselves, I can't do this, maybe we should be realistic. When I have sometimes the opposite problem, especially when it's involved with physical labor. I really can't do it anymore. But I keep telling myself, yes, I'm gonna. And that's another kind of self, not dealing with oneself in the right way. That, yes, we all have limitations, and it's the underlying self that is is unlimited. All right, so just because I am that does not mean that the body is going to conventionally fall apart and I should pretend I am that and just force it through. I can do that really well. Just do it. Is that a kind way to be in the world to yourself? On the other hand, mollycoddling, you know the word mollycoddling? It means, as people have said to me, why are spiritual aspirants so narcissistic? In other words, why is it all about you? It's about me and my kleshas. We have to be careful that we don't fall into that category too. That ultimately, we'll talk about it later, but ultimately that's a trap, because at any point, asmita, ahankara, can co-opt our spiritual practice. So a way to do that is just don't ride in judgment one way or the other on anybody or or yourself. I can't do this. Oh, I did this, but she didn't. Look, she doesn't even know what selfless service is. Can't you see that we need help in the kitchen, but she's sitting there meditating? So then there's the last one, which is unawareness. There's the basic unawareness, but there's also unawareness, kind of like blinder kind of unawareness. So there's lots of, first of all, we're not aware of how we really exist, which is thou art that, O Shvetaketu. That's the basic unawareness. We're just not aware. Or anybody else. Which is why seeing God in everything is such a wonderful thing. Start intellectually and live your way into the experience. We're not really convinced. Swami Yogatmanandaji says, see God in everything. And we hear it, but we're not really convinced. That's another kind of unawareness. We're not convinced enough that we're going to say, yes, I'm going to go for it. We think, well, might be true, but I don't know. On the other hand, it might not be. Down the street, the Buddhist will say something else. Maybe I should go there. And then we go and hear that, and we think, well, that might be true. Well, I'm not really convinced. Will we try any of this stuff if we're not convinced? We might try a little. What Swami Vivekananda says is, try it, and through the practice, you will begin to have your conviction grow stronger. But don't try it as I'll dip into a little of this and dip into a little of that. Well, I'm still not convinced. That's the problem. What are we going to be convinced about? What convincing does the one need? In other words, who is this I that has to be convinced? It's again another kind of play of the kleshas. Well, I have to be convinced. We'll never be convinced. We can't be convinced because the very nature of our experience is moving away from that kind of conviction. The fact that I am I is kind of a contradiction to what we're trying to be convinced about. So there won't be ultimate conviction until we live our way into it. But as we go little by little, and the little things that we do strengthen our practice, we become more and more convinced until we become like Sri Ramakrishna says, if thieves know there's a treasure in the next room, are they going to stop to get it? No, they will stop at nothing to get that treasure. So little by little we come to know there's the treasure in the next room, except the treasure is actually ourself. And so what are we going to do? We're going to stop at nothing to remove the screen in front of that treasure. And but we will never be convinced in that sort of way that we expect to be convinced until we live our way into the experience. Because it won't be an intellectual experience that we convince ourselves about. Does that make sense? So there is another thing that we do in unawareness. What do you think it is? Foggy mindedness. And that we become foggy minded or confused. And sometimes we do it to ourselves on purpose, and we are not even aware of it. That you can see it if you stand up here. I don't see it now, but in the past I can see people at Ridgely I know pretty well. You can see them looking for reasons to be confused by what I'm saying. But. That, and maybe I really am being confusing, but it's there's this look. I'm going to match it up and find, okay, I'm going to listen to what the person is saying, and then my mind is going to go and find the one anomaly. And I'm going to say, but. I'm going to listen, and instead of taking it as a working hypothesis, I'm going to find out all the reasons why it might not work. Which I've discovered is a thinking style that some people do. Or you say it's green, they'll say, no, I think it's yellow. that it's almost an unwillingness to go there. So foggy mindedness can manifest like that, or it can just be, I fall asleep. I can't deal with this. I got to go to sleep. Oh, I'm so tired. I listened to Gitaprana for 2 hours. That's enough. This is too much for me. Or the other thing that is more annoying to me, at least, is flightiness of mind. We all experience it, right? Flightiness means we just can't concentrate. We want to. Maybe we don't want to. Maybe we'll be just happy sitting there. Should I say this? My aunt, the same devotee, was a part of the whole group of women devotees at the San Francisco Center under Swami Ashokananda. And Swami Ashokananda said, no matter what, no matter when I am dead, you have to attend the center. You have to go, no matter what you think. And so they evolved a strategy, no matter who was speaking, of going there and looking totally attentive. But I was once with them. This is like Marie-Louise Burke and Dorothy and a whole bunch of them. And they all started sharing with each other after the talk what they were actually doing while they were looking totally attentive. And so we can evolve that strategy. But that is, in other words, mind can easily convince you that you're paying attention when you're not. That flightiness of mind can go all over the place and you can look like you're there. But and you want to concentrate. Say you've been reading for a really long time, you're trying to put together a retreat, but you're tired and your mind just won't stay. That's flightiness, which is the opposite of fogginess. Mind just won't. This is too much unsettled. I drank too much coffee. So those are forms of unawareness that mind can take. So all of these little things, once we label them like this, and I'm hoping this is kind of helpful, that once we can label them in our own experience, we can say, aha, flightiness. And then the tradition will teach us, the Yoga Sutras uses the word pratipaksha bhavana. And that is when we detect these, there's antidotes to them, which we'll talk about the next time. But each of these kleshas has its antidote. It's pratipaksha bhavana means a thought that goes against the opposite one. So let's say, for instance, if you're feeling angry, this is not so easy, but you substitute the opposite of anger, which means there's got to be enough awareness that we can stop and say, oh, anger, not going there. Which I picked the wrong one because anger is such a strong emotion that it's not so easy to do that once it's popped up. But the idea here is we're separating, as I said before, we're separating the perception from all our story about it. And I say, I choose, it doesn't choose me. In other words, I am not this anger. I am not this thought. I can choose a different one. It's not because it pops in my head, that's me. It's just another, as they say in the Yoga Sutras, it's another vritti, it's another wave in the mind. And it's moving continuously, and I'm snatching at it and saying, that's me. But it's moved on already, but I'm holding it here. Because I'm, of course, a solid, wrapped in plastic, never-changing individual. That somehow, and everything that pops into my head is also solid and wrapped in plastic and never changing. Therefore, it's her fault. Because. So, let's review. What are the kleshas? When I really want something, what is it called? Yeah, and when I have it and I don't want to lose it, what is it called? Attachment. And when I have it but I want more and more, what is it called? course, I would like more and more of the ability to meditate, but anyway. We'll have to go through this at the end. But we're talking at this level of identifying these things in our mind. Do I want more and more love? Is my relationship with my friends or my wife or my husband a transaction where for so many units of love you give me so many back? So, in other words, am I in true love knows no bargaining? Okay, so if I don't want something, what is it? Aversion. No, I don't want it. It might happen, or it maybe really is happening, and no, I don't want it. Okay, if I don't want something, what is the tendency of my mind? Avoidance is one. Flight is one. What's the other one that goes with flight? Fight. I feel like harming it. I feel like hurting it. That you may think, oh, I wouldn't harm anything, until my husband says something, and out of my mouth, without me even thinking, all a string of criticism comes. That's not exactly what we would say, oh, that's not harming. Well, what is it? So, if there's impatience, if there's something I don't want, but I might get, what do? I feel anxious, yeah? It might happen. Anxiety always looks in the future. Oh, it might happen. I might get on a flight tomorrow and there might be an Ebola scare and there might be this and there might be that and I might be late and they might have to... We all know that. Okay, if I think I'm something pretty darn special, what is that? What if I think I'm something awful? It's shame, the opposite of pride. And if I can't let that go and that's what I'm attached to, I'm clinging to it, what do I feel? Guilt, yes? And the Dalai Lama has a wonderful but rather uncouth definition of guilt. Are you ready for it? If we are in the bathroom and doing whatever elimination that we did, and instead of just flushing the toilet, we sit there and go, oh, how awful! That's guilt. The thing is, just flush it. In other words, acknowledge we did something that we didn't like and move forward. Don't cling on to it and say, oh, I'm so bad, and build a whole new story. All right, and if we are just completely wavering and unwilling to entertain any possible hypothesis at all because we're just not convinced, what is that?
Confusion.
Confusion, and what is confusion? Unawareness. We're kind of doing like a little baby form of the original so-called confusion where we are, through a trick of Maya, becoming us, where the one appears as many. So then, of course, as you know, in the different traditions, how and in what way the one appears as many is differently described. That, say, the duality is there is a one and there is a many, there's two. You know, here's the reality and here's Prakriti and here's Purusha, and there are two realities. Or the one, actually, everyone has a spark, a part, an angsha, a piece of the one. And so that's the Christian tradition follows this a lot. We are a spark inside of us of God is in us. Or the Advaitic position, thou art that, we are that. But the Shankara Advaita position, we appear to be that. I mean, no, our appearance, that never became this. It only appears to be that. Or the Tantric version of that, which that did become this, but is still that. So, which that will be variously described, and why? Because words don't go there. So there'll always be a million different ways of trying to describe how it is that the undivided and the infinite appears to be divided and finite. So if you can add some confusion to the unknowing by knocking your head against all these different explanations. And the Buddhists have a wonderful explanation for this. They call it infatuation with views. In other words, instead of doing the work, we love the philosophical explanation, but we never go within to find out how it works in our own mind and heart. So we don't want to do that either. So adopt one. And often people work with our teachers to know which one is the one. That adopt a view and go for it. And so the last part, which we'll do, I guess, this afternoon, is how. How will we, partly we know, I've said a little bit about how in just describing. But there is what is called in Buddhism Eightfold Path, and in Yoga Sutras, Ashtanga, the 8 limbs of yoga. And which some of it was read today at the meditation, Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. So that forms the core path, no matter whether you're a jnani so-called, or a bhakta, or a Raja Yogi, or a karma yogi. To me, these are words, and they're convenient to identify what is the tendency of our mind. But what I see a lot is people stratifying themselves. Well, that is bhakta stuff, and I don't like it. San Francisco used to be, ages ago, the Jnani Center, and Los Angeles was the Bhakta Center. But if you actually analyze in your mind what it takes to be a bhakta or a jnani, it's the same things. It takes devotion in both paths. Bhaktas are devoted to God, jnanis are devoted to the truth. It takes conviction to move forward in our path and let everything else go. It takes viveka. It takes discrimination. What's getting in the way of my love of God? Out it goes. So viveka, which associates with jnanis, actually the bhaktis use too. It takes vairagya, no matter what. Whether you're a jnani, whether you're a bhakta, whether you're a karma yogi, you have the right to act, but not to the results. It takes all of those to sit on the meditation mat when your mind is going to China and you think you can't do it. In other words, all the requirements for each path are the same. The objects are just slightly different according to our nature of mind. So we can really make ourselves confused by trying to make a unified system out of all of this. Oh, well, I can't justify God with form and God without form. Well, that's language inside the avidya. That's avidya language. In other words, what form, what formless? As Sri Ramakrishna said, both are equally true. So we can bang our heads against all of this, but I think that be careful about putting the 4 yogas into a box and saying, well, I'm a bhakta, so I don't like this jnani stuff. Or I'm a jnani and I will not sit there and worship a form. Well, when we worship our idea of Brahman, what is that? It's a form. It's the same thing. So avoid all of that, and just wherever, whatever it takes for each one of us to start moving our hands away from our eyes, that's what we should do little by little, and not, compare ourselves or criticize ourselves or others. Or there's 5 C's, but I can remember only those right now. Comparison, criticism, maybe I'll remember them at lunch.